All righty, my friends. Thank you very much for being here today. Today is Good Friday, and I also want to wish you all both a happy Easter, but more importantly, a happy Resurrection Day. For we are here to celebrate the resurrection of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. We keep that in mind because we're going down some dark rabbit holes today. I want to underscore that today is not my belief system, but their belief system. And part of my mission is to show you the dark side that is affecting everything in our lives, to expose the evil, even on Easter weekend, Ishtar. But this is about our Lord and Savior, right? Raising from the dead, the defeating of death, the real meaning and the real evidence of the resurrection of the dead. But what we're going to talk about today is the resurrection of the dead from the dark, occult, mystical side of things. And today, Kev Baker, my good buddy, is going to engage in conversation throughout the show today. We had a great show a few days ago talking about, I don't even remember what. So what were we talking about last show, Kev? Bring it in.
So you're putting me on the spot like that, Tony. No, we were you were connecting the ritual that's about to take place at Burning Man, which is going to occur after this egg-shaped eclipse goes over the US. And then also you were tying it in with CERN, DNA, and this whole resurrection of the dead, because the more I listen to you, Tony, and the more I do my own research and reading as well, I mean, even going back through the ages to that character, John Dee, that you keep on talking about, this is exactly what they were trying to do then. And even furthermore than that, this is something they've been trying to do forever.
It really is, and we're going to go into what we've touched on before a little bit, called Enochian mathematics, or the language of Enoch. And there are two Enochs. We're talking about the Enoch that was communicating with angels, fallen angels, more specifically, not necessarily the Enoch who was resurrected to heaven, or caught up to heaven. We're also going to go into, and Kev, I'll let you add a little bit of backstory to this, but we are going to talk about Tesla and his statement about 369. So if you want to take his quote and read it for the audience, Kev, go right ahead. Are you there, Kev?
Oh, muted up, Tony. Amateur mistake. Okay. But yeah, this is like I was sharing before the show. I mean, Nikola Tesla was somebody that I had no idea about probably over 10 years ago. And then when I started looking into all this alternative information and the stuff you don't get taught in school, this was one character who kept on jumping out at me. And, you know, if you're a geek like myself and Tony and you're into science and you start looking into this guy, just wow. And there's so many quotes to choose from out there, but the one that we're really going to concentrate on tonight, because Tony's he's had some massive revelations. And I think this is one of his most famous quotes anyway. And it goes like this: if you knew the magnificence of the 3, 6, and 9, you would have a key to the universe. Now that sounds very vague. What does that even mean? Well, Tony, you've been looking into that, haven't you?
Yeah, and thank you. You've put together some beautiful graphics. I don't know if you'll be able to post those in chat, but
we'll share them right now, my man.
All righty. Kev will be posting to his YouTube channel this show as well, and the graphics. I encourage people after the show to go to his YouTube channel and look at what he has put together on this topic and discussing the comparison of Tesla to, let's call it the Masonic model, the cube model of things, of the universe, of reality. In my book, Revising Reality, I get into this a little bit in terms of the tetrahedrons and the 600 cell tetrahedrons and the comparison of Tesla to Einstein. we're going to be comparing Tesla and John Dee and his cohort, Edward Kelly, from back in the 1500s, and their communication with fallen angels. Because I'm going to give you the punchline up front, and then we're going to backfill. We're going to give you the evidence. John Dee and Edward Kelly, specifically Dr. John Dee, probably the most educated and probably the most intelligent individual during his lifetime. He had the largest collection of books in his personal library in the world, outside of perhaps the Vatican. What I'm getting at here is that John Dee and Edward Kelly, in their communication with fallen angels, which was both a written language and also a language of mathematics, they were focused on the cube. Let's call it just the square model, okay? Specifically the tesseract, the cube within the cube, which, by the way, is reproduced at the northern pole of Saturn. In the hexagonal northern pole is a tesseract. But Kelly and Dee were focused on the tesseract as being the model for how to turn lead into gold, transmutation of elements, focused on that as the model of the universe. Well, in Tesla's quote of, if you understood the relationship of 3, 6, and 9, you would understand that the real model of the universe is not a cube. The real model of the universe is based on the tetrahedron. If you look at the tetrahedrons the way Tesla does, he came up with exactly the same model of the universe that I'm showing you in chat, and that is the 600 cell tetrahedron. The universe is a sphere. Okay, it's not just a circle like flat earthers want to say about Earth. It's a sphere composed of tetrahedrons. So we'll get into that very deeply here today, but where Tesla was in his thinking was quite a bit different than the thinking of John Dee. What Tesla did, because he was a latter-day researcher and scientist, he was, as we have up in chat, he was born in 1856 and died in 1943, tragically died penniless and perhaps insane at that point. Whereas John Dee was in the 1500s and died in 1608. But Tesla understood what was going on with this whole Enochian mathematics, this communications with the fallen angels. Tesla even admitted to a certain extent he too was communicating with the fallen angels, but his approach was from a Christian standpoint, not an occultist. He understood the occult. He understood the mechanisms, the language, the mathematics. But he understood it was all about 3, 6, and 9. And Kev and I are going to break that down in a moment. But he understood the true geometry of the universe, from the elemental level to the cosmological. The reason for the cube today as being the model of mainstream science, the use of the cube, as in the black cube of Saturn, the worship of the black cube, the black sun, tied to the Nazis, which we'll get into later on in the show, because there's a tie into them. But the reason that mainstream science today and the world of the intelligence communities focus on the cube is this is the matrix. You've heard us talk about the sentient world simulation. This is the matrix, the box that they want us to live in. They want us constrained in our math and in our language to living and existing spiritually and psychologically within the confines of a world, a reality that is defined in terms of the mathematics associated with the cube. They do not want us to understand the relationship of 369, the tetrahedron. The reason for that is immortality. I told you, I'm going to give you the punchlines up front. The tetrahedron, the 369, the model of the universe, the 600 cell tetrahedron that I've been showing you guys for years now. This is the mathematics of how you achieve immortality through DNA. They do not want you to understand that. They want you to think that you have to remain with your thinking within a box. Hence the phrase, thinking outside the box. They do not want you to do that. What we are doing here today is talking about getting outside the box and looking at the true mathematics, the construct of DNA, and the fact that this is all tied to their goal of achieving immortality. And they are using the tetrahedron connected with DNA, and I'll define it later. But the tetrahedron, the 369, has everything to do with the structure, the sequential coding of DNA, the codons, the 64 codons within DNA. If you understand 369, you understand how to modify DNA so as to achieve immortality. That's what the fallen angels have been communicating through people like John Dee and Edward Kelly and others before them and others since them, like Crowley, okay, Jack Parsons. They were communicating the keys to immortality, and they used the Tesseract to control people, to control the masses, to lock them out. They did not want Tesla revealing to the world 369 in the tetrahedron. So, Kev, if you want to put up, if you haven't already, okay, you have. There's a graphic in here with Tesla's picture. It has a 600 cell next to it. It has a tetrahedron in full form, and then it has the tetrahedron laid out as a two-dimensional image. It's the two-dimensional I would like you to focus on. If you look at the straight lines of this two-dimensional representation, and those of you that can't see this, if you go to Google and just type in tetrahedron and look at a two-dimensional representation, we're going to count the lines starting at the top of the pyramid. At the left is 1. Go to the right is 2. Go to the base of that triangle, and that's 3. Go all the way down to the left corner at the bottom, 4. And counting to the right, 5, 6, 7, and now the base, 8 and 9. That is 369. Now that seems pretty simple. But I've been looking at tetrahedrons and 600 cells for years. And I guess, dummy me, blind spot, can't see, the tree standing in the middle of the forest of data and information. But that's as simple as it gets. That's why Tesla would reduce everything down to 369 so that everybody, you and me, could understand how simple the key to the universe is. So what does it mean when we look at a two-dimensional tetrahedron and we come up with 369? You go, oh, big deal. Okay, that's interesting geometry. Well, it's all about geometry. All the information coming through from the fallen angels is all about the geometric structure at the elemental level to the macrocosmological level. It is all the same. It is all the same geometry. And it begins with the single tetrahedron that Buckminster Fuller said that if the simplest form, the simplest geometric form that can enclose a volume is a tetrahedron. He was talking about Tesla's 369 tetrahedron. The singularity is a tetrahedron. If you begin to build your structures at an elemental level or a cosmological, you build it from the singularity. You build it one at a time, one upon another. So we're going to break this down a little bit further, but I want my buddy Kev to jump in with some of his thoughts, and then I'm going to give you some of the not complex mathematics, but further mathematical discussion of this. So Kev, go ahead.
This is why I had to wait so long in my life to learn about Nikola Tesla, because they don't want people looking into this. And you hit the nail on the head, Tony, when you were talking about thinking outside the box. They absolutely hate the thought of anyone coming out of the box. And when you go to university and things like that, you learn how to repeat all the kind of stuff that keeps you in their box, never once thinking outside of it and looking for other explanations, i.e. the likes of Tesla out there. But Tony, even just listening to you there explaining about how Buckminster Fuller was really hot on these tetrahedrons, even if people just picture this in their minds, if you build a tetrahedron out of matchsticks, it's the fewest matchsticks you could use to actually enclose a space right enough. You could go for that cube. But again, he's wanting the very simplest form. And like Tony says, this universe, you start with the one, and from there, you build outwards. And Tony, you see this everywhere, even in nature, right?
Oh, absolutely. When people talk about fractal patterns that are reproducing down into an infinite point where fractals continue to divide, or I should say replicate, and then you move out from that center point, that's exactly the same thing with the tetrahedron, the 600-cell tetrahedron, that if you move to the center point of that image, it's the same fractal process. It's a fractal process of diminishing, reducing in number of tetrahedrons. If you pull out to the macro, you're now seeing that replication, that duplication process of tetrahedrons forming more and more of the platonic solids like cubes, and eventually at its outer limits, the sphere, the spherical shape. And that's where I want to go to. Let's take a look at 369 again. If you look at 3, it forms a triangle in 2 dimensions, flat triangle, okay? That's the 3 that Tesla was talking about. He says that's 2 dimensions. Now, if you go to 6, that forms the tetrahedron, and that is 3-dimensional. If you go to 9, it forms the round sphere, okay? And that includes the 4th dimension, which is time. Time is contained within the 600-cell tetrahedron. Within the spherical model of the universe, time is represented as the 4th dimension. So 3 is 2-dimension, triangle. 6 is 3-dimension, tetrahedron. 9 is a sphere, which is 4th dimension. That's the whole universe. In terms of human understanding and human forms of measurement and empirical analysis and reproduction and testing. Okay? So as basic and simple as a tetrahedron in 369 may seem, it actually becomes quite complex, but it retains its simplicity as it begins to reproduce into a larger macro or cosmological scale. So let's look at this for just a second without getting too deep into the math, into the geometry, because we want to get into the mechanics of what was happening between Dee and Kelly with the angels, because that, I think, is a fascinating story also, because it's going to lead us into talking about gold, about Nazis, about Prague in Czechoslovakia, World War II, why? It's going to lead us into DNA. Okay, so all these things are interconnected all the way down through history, all the way back to the Egyptians and the Sumerians. But if you take just the 2-dimensional square, just a flat square, that's composed of 90-degree angles. And there are 4 of those, and if you multiply 4 times 90, you end up with 360. You end up with a circle in 2 dimensions, the flat Earth. Okay, so the flat earthers are stuck in the Dee and Kelly paradigm of the cube. They don't see the sphere because they're part of being trapped in the cube. So for flat earthers, I'm sorry guys, but you're in a 2-dimensional world that is a false construct that you've been purposely imprisoned in. If we go to the 3D world of the sphere and the tetrahedrons, you have 30-degree angles in a flat triangle or in a tetrahedron. You multiply that 3 times 30, you end up with 90. Okay, that's 3D. But if you go to 4, it ends up as 360 in the three-dimensional representation of a sphere, the true model of the universe. In order to make that sphere, you need 4 tetrahedrons. In order to make a flat two-dimensional square, three-dimensional as a cube, you actually have to multiply 6 times 90 to 540 degrees to achieve 3D. You have a 6-sided box. Okay? 540 doesn't match 360. It's a false paradigm. It's a false reality. And again, in my book, Revising Reality, I touched on this to a degree, talking about the 600-cell tetrahedron. But I'm giving you just the starting point for you to go down your own rabbit holes of critical thinking, critical analysis, and researching on your own. But just realize that this is all about DNA, and we're moving towards DNA and immortality, because the goal through the eons in communicating with fallen angels has been the ultimate goal of finding that key to unlocking immortality, and that is done through DNA. Now, Kev, you and I'm going to bring you back in here. We've talked an awful lot about DNA, but how about a little story about Mr. Edward Kelly? He was given a homework assignment by a fallen angel that he and Dee were talking to. They were given the alphabet, the Enochian alphabet. And if you want to put that graphic up in chat for people to see, you did some beautiful work on those, and I'd like people to see them. But the basic idea here is Kelly didn't want to do his homework. And when the angel came back and said, "Do you understand the alphabet? Can you communicate with it now?" And he said, "No, I don't understand it." And according to the story, he was squeezed by this angel for 20 minutes in agony, excruciating agony. And when it finally ceased, he was able to communicate using the alphabet that the angel had given to himself and Dee. Do you know where that alphabet came from? It came from his DNA. Literally squeezed out of his DNA was the Enochian alphabet that Kev has put up in the chat room. Now, I just ran across that just recently, and it's not only fascinating as a story, but you know what it does? It explains where this information is coming from and why it's related in the tablet that Kev has got up in chat. The tablet having 4 square fields in it, joined by a cross in the middle. That has everything to do with the number of codons in DNA. There are 64 codons in DNA. And that DNA is sequenced. That DNA contains binary coding. This is why Kevin and I have talked about Dr. Stephen Venter and his whole sequencing of the human DNA process. Because the DNA has not only mathematical information, but it has an alphabet in it. And that's what was being squeezed out physically by this fallen angel with Kelly. And now he's not the only one who's ever been able to access an alphabet, a language, a literal language from the DNA. Others before and since Kelly have done this. We're about to go to break, but I'm going to tell you where we're going to transition into, and Kev's going to add to this conversation after the break. And that is, when you look at the Great Table containing the alphabet in 4 different fields joined by a cross in the middle, we are looking at a qubit. We are looking at D-Wave's model for how they arrange qubits on their chipset to communicate with fallen angels using both the alphabet, the written language, and then using that language to build the machine, to build the quantum computer. They were able to shift to a purely mathematical form of communication. And that's where we're at today. Full-time, real-time communication using quantum computers. And we'll be right back.
Tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR.
Truth frequency radio.
It's cropping up again. Shut it off,
Tony.
Kill that thing.
You actually love the bumper music. We threatened to get rid of it one week, and I thought there was going to be a lynch mob outside the studio, man.
Yeah, it's something to make fun of. It's all right. It's all right. And, I really try to keep things light around here because this is some really deep stuff. And, let's get back into this grid that you had posted up in the chat room, this 8x8 grid, which ends up being 64 codons of RNA. What are your thoughts on that? What are your reactions to that, Kev?
Well, I could strangle you because you've thrown me down this Enochian rabbit hole, so you have. And I was reading today, this is quite interesting here, and it's a gentleman called Vincent Bridges. Now, he was writing something called The Complete Enochian Handbook. And I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs here because it really ties in with what Tony's saying about this DNA, and also it expands further. It starts talking about software and hardware. It says here, both the Enochian Vision, Magic, and Complete Enochian Handbook described components such as the Holy Table, the Layman's, the Seal of Ameth, Ring, elemental tablets derived from the Great Table, the Tablet of Union, and a whole heap of other things that Bridges goes on to call communication hardware. Now, these were set up to run the programs given to Dee and Kelly, and considers the language itself as a software. Now, he considers the whole Enochiana as complex multi-dimensional system that seems to function like a 4-dimensional computer able to interface with our 3-dimensional modes of processing light waves into images and pressure into sound waves. This is where it gets really interesting because it says here, when one understands that Dee and Kelly were trying to communicate with, quote, something that they called, quote, angels, which was beyond themselves, and were receiving from those somethings a system literally designed to lever our local reality by bringing in energies of the multiverse, then it makes sense to try and understand the whole system before using any part of it. Now, the language itself, in terms of letter organization, here it comes, seems to correspond to both the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching and the 64 codons of DNA. I nearly fell off my chair when I read that earlier, Tony, because I know all the stuff that you're talking about. I sent that to you, and it's just confirmation yet again that you're not off your head, man. You really are onto something here.
Well, I'm definitely going to study this in more depth, and he is correct.
Imagine that, though, Tony. Here's John Dee and Ed Kelly back in the day, 1500s, receiving this language that was intended for fourth dimensions and computing and stuff like that. And there was us talking on the show the other night about how these demonic entities have always kind of targeted the brainiacs out there. And that's how we are where we are today with the likes of the D-Wave and everything else, right?
That is true. If you would put up in chat room your graphic that's the composite that shows the progression from Cartesian down to the spherical mathematics with the Kabbalah tree, because we're going to get into that in just a moment. But
there we go.
Thank you. To kind of give you a bigger pullback, a bigger view of what Chris or Kev was just talking about and the quotes he was giving. It's important to understand that back in the 1500s, they didn't have the ability to build a computer. They just didn't have the physical hardware, nor any concept of building a computer as we would know a computer today. They were receiving binary information. They were receiving mathematical information and a alphabetical language, 2 languages. But here's the thing that's fascinating about the alphabetical, the written language, because this goes into the Hebraic. This goes into the mystic societies. This goes to the Hebrew, mystical and, well, let's just call it the black magic direction. I'm not trying to say that, Jews are a problem or that the Hebrews or the Hebrew language is a problem, that I'm being anti-Semitic or anything here, because as everyone can well appreciate, there's 2 sides. There's 2 ways of implementing theology or science or technology. You can use it for, let's say, the good purposes or the bad purposes. So that's kind of where we're going to, is we're talking about Kabbalistic, rituals and communication. But to be more specific in what I'm trying to give you as a bigger picture is that the Hebraic language can be broken down into a cubical system. When you look at the Hebrew language and you translate it, it goes to the Kabbalah tree and it goes to the cubical model that we just laid out for you. So there are some issues in terms of these rituals that are performed that I'll get into a little bit deeper. We're going to get into talking about the golem. I'm talking about Golem. These are actual creatures. Okay, we'll get into that in a little bit. But it all relates back to this transmutation of lead into gold. And we'll be talking about Rabbi Lo Ben Bezalel. I can't pronounce his last name. Bezalel. But we're talking about rituals of communication that manifest in the physical. The alphabetical language, when spoken and when used in these Kabbalistic practices, manifest physically. The same thing happens with the mathematics of today. When I say that these manifest in the physical, I'm saying that they can manifest in terms of transmuting lead into gold, changing elements. But it goes to DNA as well, because the spoken language based on an alphabet, as well as the mathematical language of today, is all about DNA coding and the modification of that code, the manipulation of that coding. So as Kevin and I have talked about for a long time, this whole thing of sequencing DNA, reducing DNA down to its binary coding, we are talking about reducing it down to the cubical model, the box model of 2 strands of DNA and a binary code. The binary code of computers and of Kelly and Dee was a binary code of mathematical coding of zeros and ones, but a binary code of a spoken and written language from the angels, a binary alphabet that resulted in the Hebraic language of the cubical model. Again, the matrix. When we look at D-Wave, we are looking at the black cube enclosure of that computer. And that is because that is the model that they want people to see. What they do not want you to see is the fact that they have built a computer that is constructed as a sphere. My 600-cell tetrahedral model of the universe is what D-Wave has built as, let's call it, their ultimate configuration of a quantum computer. But they don't want people to know that. Now, I'm being kind of, jumping around a little bit here, but we're going to add more information as we go into the show. I'm giving you the highlights. If you look at the graphic that Kev put up called Cracking the Enochian Code, and next to it is the Kabbalah tree, the tree of life. If you look at those two, they appear to be two-dimensional. If you take the tree of life and you have 4 of those, you can create a spherical model of the universe and of DNA. That's part of that's one of the many applications of the tree of life. But it will actually form a sphere with one of those Kabbalah trees running right up through the center of the sphere, just like the spinal column. Just like the advertised and presented in public model of D-Wave's computer that's in the cube, it has a spinal column of qubits hanging within the cube. That's the only part they want you to see. They don't want you to know that if you take all of those Kabbalah trees and curve them and lay them out, they will form into a sphere with one tree going up through the center, just like the spinal column. Now, this is very mystical. This is very occult. This application of this Enochian information with high technology. So I'm going to go back just a little bit with D-Wave. D-Wave utilized the same process of communicating with the angels in the alphabetical sense to gain the information that they needed to then apply mathematics in their further communication. The building of these quantum computers that, by their own admissions, their own statements, they communicate with thousands upon thousands of parallel dimensions. This is a literal communication tool that Dee and Kelly had no concept of, obviously, in the 1500s. But you leap forward to today, and the same process of communication and getting the same information is now materialized in the form of this computer system. And all of this is tied to CERN, of course, with the opening of the abyss. So, what I'm getting at here is that these ancient Kabbalistic practices are behind virtually every area, every aspect of science today. It could all be traced back to this communication, and Dee and Kelly were not the first ones. They were in a string of mystics, if you will, alchemists. This is what all the alchemists were involved in. And this is what is continuing in the world of science today, because scientists are nothing more than modern day versions of alchemists. So, Kev, if you had a thought, I wanted to let you jump in here today and join the conversation, but I'll go on.
I mean, when you start talking quantum computers and stuff like that, my ears really do pick up. And I always talk about Easy Eric. Now, Easy Eric is somebody that's called Eric Ladzinski. Now, for anyone out there who doesn't know who Eric Ladzinski is, he's going to be probably one of the most important people living in our time. And that's because he is half of the partnership. And Tony, he's probably the brains, wouldn't you say, behind this D-Wave computer. Now, I'm imagining, right, I'm thinking when he was a bit younger in university, probably MIT or one of these places, do you think he was dabbling then in the occult, Tony? Was he looking into the works of Crowley, the Golden Dawn, back to Dee, back to the Egyptian stuff? How do you think he stumbled upon this? Or do you think he was just used by DARPA when he was working alongside them?
I would imagine it probably started when he was a young man at the university, and probably, as often happens, let's take the the pattern of practice with the intelligence communities when they're recruiting on college campuses. They go after the intelligent ones. Same thing with the dark side, if you will. They're going to go after the intelligent ones and introduce them to things that they would naturally, because they're intelligent, they would naturally be inquisitive about. And if they were to lure them with the carrot of saying, you can unlock the secrets to immortality, boy, that would grab somebody like Gordy Rose, grab his attention.
Of course, Tesla, he said he was speaking to Martians at one point. So do you think then, and we're speculating here, Tony, I know that, but do you think Tesla was speaking to the light side angels, or do you think it was the same bad demons that were trying to use Tesla, only he caught on to what was going on here?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, because from what I've read of Tesla, I think he had good intentions for humanity. All of his, let's call them inventions, were for the purpose of improving man's lot in life. Yes, he had weapons, of course, but it's kind of like the discussion with Nobel. Nobel was trying to develop, dynamite to stop all wars. Well, we see where that went. Kind of the same thinking with Tesla was, if I could just develop the ultimate in weaponry and power generation, things like that, maybe we could do without war. Maybe we could, eliminate it. But unfortunately, it doesn't always go the way that we plan. And I think he had good intentions and was trying to get information for good reasons. But he did discover the origins of who these people were, these angels, these entities he was communicating with. And that's where I believe he shut it down. That's where I believe he turned away, because he did believe in God, did believe in Jesus Christ, did believe in, the salvation through the blood and the shedding of the blood, the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. So, it's kind of like you're walking this fine line where, he understands God as the creator, but he's also seeking information. And you have to be very careful when you access that information, who it is that you're talking with.
We all know what happens when you eat from the tree, Tony.
That's correct. That is exactly right, my friend. So, I'm not an advocate for tapping into these angels. I'm not an advocate for following the path of Tesla. I'm not an advocate of being, a practitioner of the Kabbalistic practices, the Jewish Kabbalistic practices. That probably gets me in trouble with, people in the Jewish community are saying, you're being anti-Semitic. No, I'm not. I'm just saying that there's a dark side to everything. And, you have to be very careful who you associate with, who you speak with, who you participate in events with. It's very tough. We talk an awful lot about the truth and discerning the truth on Truth Frequency Radio. It's difficult to know who you're talking to, and sometimes you're talking to people that have good intentions who don't even realize that perhaps they've fallen into a dark trap of deception or lies, or unaware that they're being influenced by the dark side. And that can happen even in the Christian community as well as the Jewish community. So I'm really cautioning people, and I'm saying, look, it's fascinating to look at Enochian math and language. But for me, what I have to do is pray about this before I dive into it, and pray for the proper discernment and protection, because the last thing that I want to do is to be in contact with fallen angels, nor to be influenced by them.
And Tony, I went to Crowley's old gaff, as you know, and he was dabbling in this very kind of stuff. He was conducting a massive working at the time on the shores of Loch Ness. And these same entities that were giving this language to Dee and Kelly back in the day, they would have been there at Crowley's place as well. And, there's me just wading in there, taking Anne and my brother and everyone up to Boleskine House, not caring the world. Yet my mum, she knew better, Tony, because she would not go near that house. And it's the same kind of thing as you're talking about here. It's all very well going and looking at the dark side and dabbling in it and things, but it's a whole lot more real and dangerous than any of us appreciate. And if I was to go back to Boleskine House right now, big if, I would be pouring holy water over myself. I'd be getting everyone out there to pray for me. I'm telling you, Tony, that place, you can feel the energy still there today. There's something about it, man.
I'm sure, and I'm glad you're staying away from there, because certainly these places do have spirits. They do have energy there. They do have entities there, and it's easy because a lot of this stuff in mainstream entertainment, is put in the context of entertainment, but the entertainment industry is reflecting the real reality of what's going on, because you cannot separate the physical from the spiritual, and we wrestle against spiritual entities. We wrestle against the evil side. We wrestle against that energy that's at that site. So, this is nothing to dabble in, and that's not what I'm doing here. I'm trying to raise the alarm about where mainstream science and the world of technology with computers and DNA research, where they're getting their information and the mechanism by which they're getting this information. So when we talk about something as radical as a guy being grabbed by an angel and squeezed for 20 minutes to get the language, the alphabet, to be extruded, to be extracted from his DNA, that's quite a rabbit hole to go down, because the ramifications of that understanding that DNA has both a alphabet language and a mathematical language, a binary, as we talked about the 64 codons. This is remarkable. Now, Tesla talked about understanding frequency and vibration of the universe and of the elements. This is what he was talking about. He was talking about DNA. If you put on a different pair of glasses with a filter of DNA as a topic on, and you read through Tesla's work, you begin to understand that he was trying to achieve the same things that many of these guys were in terms of DNA modification. And this is where I'm going to leap to gold and the third strand of DNA and how this relates to 369 and the tetrahedron. Because when you're talking about modifying DNA, when we talk about somebody like the bloodline of Cain resulting in Osiris, who was both human and a deity, a god, if you will, and same thing with Nimrod. What we're talking about here is Nimrod changed his own DNA, and you've heard me say that many times. The specifics of that is that he added a third strand. This is 369. This is the tetrahedron. The tetrahedron is describing the three strands of DNA. This is what they were trying to build. When I talk about communicating with the language and with mathematics, well, okay, so you're communicating, you're talking, and you're sharing numbers, and you're building geometric models. The alphabet language was used by Dee and Kelly in a spoken and written language of the day, to describe the complex geometric arrangements of elements all the way out to the orbits of the planets, according to Dee, as well as the arrangement in the cosmos of what was observed during those 1500s and before. They were trying to, with a written spoken language, describe geometric shapes throughout the universe, throughout nature, if you will. What they lacked was the mathematical capability to build those geometric models in a computer. Now, Dee was a mathematician, and he could describe things mathematically, but he did not have the advanced equations, the advanced algorithms. He did not have the advanced programming language. So the gentleman you quoted earlier, talking about software and hardware, what we're talking about here is in the 1500s, they could not build the hardware and software that resulted in a computer like we have today with D-Wave. The reason for the communication, the languages, the math, the geometry, the reason for the quantum computers today is not just communicating with parallel dimensions. The quantum computers of D-Wave are for the purpose of building 3 strands of DNA, which down at the building block level, they are arranged as 3 strands in a tetrahedral 3-6-9 pattern. When you do that, you have the ability to achieve immortality, because immortality comes from building the DNA into a spherical arrangement that matches the model of the universe, which is comprised of the Kabbalah tree formed into a sphere using multiple Kabbalah trees. The Kabbalah trees are built of tetrahedrons. The sphere is then built into a spherical arrangement of DNA that achieves immortality. Now, when you take all that in, it is quite astounding if you know about computer history, if you have a background in the Kabbalistic practices. It gives you some clarity. We'll be right back.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to this week's Anthony Patch Show with me, your co-host, Kev Baker, and the main man is with me as well, Anthony Patch. Check him out at anthonypatch.com. Now then, you all know that I'm a lover of these TV shows out there, and I do it for you. So everyone out there, you don't have to get programmed. I sit and I persevere and I go through these TV shows. I know it's a hard life, right? But one of the shows that really brings a lot of what Tony and myself and others speak of together is called The 100. Now, in this show, basically, we're in the future. There's been a nuclear war. We've had people living above the planet on a space station. They come back down to Earth. Now, on Earth, there are a group of people there, and they're called the Grounders. Now, some of them are even called the black blood, they call it. Now, long story short, what they do in that show is it's right about the time we are now. People talking about neural laces and kind of integrating with AI. Now, in this show, there's a scientist called Becca. Now, she realizes that if you create an AI, you have to have it so that it interfaces with humanity, because that way, it's the only way it's ever going to be allowed or able to understand basic human feelings and desires. So, to integrate humans with this AI system, they take something called the Prima Fire, the flame. Now, the flame itself, you could basically say, Tony, this is like a cybernetic implant, and it's created by this scientist in the show. Now, it's a passive artificial intelligence that merges with an organic brain at the brain stem. Now, that sounds very much like the neural lace, right? So here we are, the chip in this 100 show to integrate us into their artificial matrix, so to speak, with a fake city of light where there's no pain, everyone's singing Kumbaya, etc. They take something called Prima Fire, the flame, Tony.
That's amazing. You know, it's almost exactly the same words that are used when we talk about the head of Osiris being contained in a jar that is surrounded in the DNA, the head, being protected by the sacred fire. It is also what is known as the powder of projection. This is all about gold. So what they're talking about in that movie is the use of gold for the manipulation and enhancement of DNA. And what I've talked about with the third strand of DNA being comprised of silica and then coated with a nano-thin coating of gold to achieve that third strand, that tetrahedral third strand. They're all talking about the same thing in the movies, And Kelly and Dee. Go ahead.
Just to build on what you're saying there, I mean, you're absolutely spot on, because in this modern culture kind of representation of the real science, what they are facing right now is all the nuclear reactors. They've got 100-year shelf life, as we all know. So because humans aren't about as much anymore, they're all starting to melt down. There's radiation building up. Now, these black bloods, the ones who have taken the chip, integrated, well, their DNA, it's able to repair in these high radiation levels. Go figure, eh? Tweaking the DNA, so self-replication, self-repair, all the kind of stuff that we talk about on here, Tony.
Yeah, and in fact, there was an article, I don't think I sent it to you, but it came out this week in terms of DNA repairing itself due to exposure or after exposure to radiation. So this is out in the common literature right now.
It really is. This is the kind of stuff as well that you'll hear Craig Venter talking about. He speaks at NASA, talks about how we could manipulate DNA so we could go on long space journeys. We just repair our own DNA like the cockroach. Great stuff. Just splice ourselves with a cockroach, Tony.
Oh, man, what a great comparison. Well, let's talk a little bit about this gold, and we'll talk about silicon. There's a let's just call it a story. Going back to the 1500s in Prague, this story was running about with Dee and Kelly. I can't talk anymore. They were friends with this rabbi I mentioned earlier in the show, Rabbi Lo Ben Bezalel, I guess is his name. Whatever. These guys were all tied into this whole thing of bringing to life what are known as the golem. It's spelled Golem, golem. If you think about the Frankenstein scenario, that's where we're going. If you think about some of these characters in entertainment, like the comic book character, the Hulk, this is what we're talking about when we speak of golems. These are basically human form creations. And I use that word creation for a reason, and I'll get to that. But they couldn't speak, and they were pretty by these Jewish Kabbalists, the Jewish mystics, the esoterics. Through this Kabbalistic practice, they were taking the literal mud from the river running through Prague that contained this gold-laden material known as the prima materia. If you think back to the Tablet of Hermes, and he describes the primary or the first material that created everything, the prima materia. That is what is known in the world of transmuting elements, specifically lead into gold. That is the powder, not power, but powder of projection. This is the sacred fire. This is the gold. This is the monoatomic gold. This is the nanothin or nanoscale gold of third strand DNA. This is all the same thing. So as the story goes, according to the rabbi, there was a meteorite several million years ago that impacted what is now Prague in the Czech Republic. And it created the cruciform, the Kabbalistic or the alchemist cruciform. This is a bowl within a bowl. And Prague resulted in mountains in a circle around it because of the impact, and then 7 within the circle, 7 mountains, 7 hills. If you think into biblical scripture, or you go to Nostradamus, he talks about the city of 7 hills. That's not necessarily the Vatican. That's not necessarily Italy. I think Nostradamus was referring to Prague, because when this meteorite struck, it left behind this monoatomic gold. this prima materia. This was powdered gold embedded in quartz and in the clay. It was everywhere around Prague. And in fact, they used the stones to build a version of Stonehenge, and the stones are all embedded in gold. And this was the material that the Kabbalists, that the alchemists used to transmute lead into gold. Was this material from Prague? That was the beginning. That's the source of the powder of projection. So it's all great and wonderful if you're creating gold out of lead, but to what point? The point is what I gave you earlier. It is for the creation of the third strand of DNA comprised of silica. It just so happens that this meteorite not only had gold in it, but it primarily, the gold was embedded in silica. This is where silica and silicon is used in the making of transistors, which then resulted in the building of qubits. The third strand of DNA being made of the same material as this meteorite, both gold and silica, to build the three-stranded in a tetrahedral 369 arrangement that results in a sphere. This is why they were communicating with the fallen angels, was to understand not only how to transmute the elements, which was all great and wonderful, but how to eventually achieve modifying human DNA for the purpose of ye shall become as gods, to achieve that immortality through DNA modification. So I hope the audience appreciates that what Kevin and I are doing here is reaching back into history and showing you the roots of what is going on today in biotech, in quantum computers, and in particle accelerators.
And Tony, even biology. Yeah. I mean, we can go back into the 50s and people might think third strand of DNA, you guys are insane. Well, what if I was to tell you that the two cats behind the whole discovery of DNA, Watson and Crick, when they were first looking into this, they were actually under the belief that they were looking into a third strand DNA. They worked, Tony, as if it was three strands. It was only then they ended up going down to trying to figure out whether it was two-stranded or not when they got the Nobel Prize. I wonder if they got the Nobel Prize for just keeping it down to two.
You hit it right on the head, my friend. Just like what happened with the suppression of Tesla's work. We all revere Einstein. And in fact, in a few days on the Discovery Channel, they're going to have a whole series on Einstein. Everything's about promoting Einstein's model of the universe, which is based on gravity rather than electromagnetism, like Tesla. And where Einstein was bought off was to adhere and indoctrinate people into this binary way of looking at not only DNA, but binary system of communication of zeros and ones with computers. Imagine if we went to a trinary or quadnary form of computer programming. And that's something I want to give you guys a little insight on, is that in my first novel, Covert Catastrophe, I developed a computer language called quadnary. It's 0, 1, skip the 2, go to 3 and 4. Quadnary programming language that I developed in the storyline for the purpose of a computer virus which would infiltrate the quantum computer systems. Little did I know that about, a year later, I ran into the fact that there was not a quadnary, but a quaternary programming language used for 3G, 4G, and 5G Wi-Fi. 5G Wi-Fi is based on a 4-number, not a 2-number form of mathematics. 5G is the language and let's be more specific, the wavelength and frequency used to communicate real time with fallen angels. Now that sounds completely ridiculous, but when you understand the relationship of the binary and the quaternary, the 4-number system, and go back to the alphabetical arrangement of the Enochian spoken and written language. It is in a 4-way representation. The tablet has 4 squares to it, containing the alphabet broken down into 4 quadrants. That's because it is also a mathematical language based on a 4-numbered, not a 2-numbered form of mathematical programming. This is what D-Wave uses. They use what is known as combinatorial optimization or combinatorial programming. This is based on supersymmetry and superposition, where zeros can be ones at the same time as ones can be zeros. This is a 4-way representation of numbers based upon Enochian numbers and language. The qubits are arranged the same way as the tablet of the letter system, the alphabet. The qubits were designed in that layout because it matches the Enochian tablet. So these guys looked to Kelly and Dee for their initial inspiration on how to communicate. They gained further information in the form of advanced mathematics to geometrically begin to arrange their qubits on their chipset. From there, they were able to build their first model computers and then advance those all the way out into a spherical arrangement, all based upon the information they were getting from the other side. Now, I kind of went off on a tangent there. We're going to go back to this discussion of Prague because we only have a few minutes, but the golem were actually created through this Kabbalistic practice by taking this gold-embedded clay from the riverbed, and they would actually form these creatures, and through rituals and incantations, they would bring to life this clay. Now, this is a bastardization of the description in Scripture of where we are formed by God from clay, from the dust of the earth that we return to. It's all similar, okay?
It's always a case of them trying to replicate and thinking they're doing better, Tony, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, they're always trying to, create...
Hijack God's system, basically, isn't it?
Totally hijacking it. And so we have these golem that were created by these rabbis for the protection of the Jewish people, protecting from enemies or from their own king or whatever. But the golem, I can't get into the whole thing because we're almost out of time, but the golem is something for you to look at and understand why they were bringing these creatures to life. Pick that up and carry it to today. What we're talking about here is resurrection. They want to, let's call it the elite, the Kabbalistics, the mystics, utilizing CERN to open the doorway to the abyss, raising those spirits from the dead and merging them with the golem of today, the hybrids that we've talked about for so long. The hybrids grown from 3 strands of DNA. They want to convert humanity to 3 strands of DNA, the mark of the beast system. They want to resurrect the golem and merge them with the spirits they're releasing in Revelation 9, opening the doorway to the abyss, which is where CERN is located. So all of these things fit together. There's nothing new under the sun. These are all old practices that are being applied in a new form of technology. So what we're talking about is ancient practices, raising the dead, and being able to achieve that final goal that the Nazis were actually after. And I'm going to give you a different way of looking at why did the Nazi Party want to invade Prague? Because they wanted the first material, the prima materia. They wanted the gold-embedded material that makes up all of Prague today. Because they were into the occult, they were into the Kabbalistic practices, and they wanted to achieve the immortality of creating a new race of supermen by using this gold to build the 3rd strand of DNA utilizing the 369 pattern of tetrahedrons, resulting in a spherical model. They knew about all this stuff. They were in communication through the Vril Society and other mechanisms of rituals and communication. They were going after the gold. When you look at the Holocaust that was brought upon the Jewish people, that was to rid anyone else's access and knowledge of these Kabbalistic practices. It was to wipe out the database. It was to wipe out the knowledge of how to achieve creating Golem, to create the supermen, to create this new race through genetic modification. So they wanted to wipe out the rabbis. They wanted to wipe out the written language. They wanted to wipe out the knowledge of the rituals and the communications with fallen angels by eliminating the Jewish race completely. And they wanted to take the gold from the Jews. They wanted to take the gold from Prague. They wanted to go to other areas of the world and take the gold, because the gold is first and primary for communication purposes with fallen angels, but then it is for the purpose of creating the hybrids, the golem, and then it is for the purpose of the modification of DNA to achieve immortality. And this is why for so many weeks now we've been talking about how gold is manifesting in commercials and movies, and how they're talking about the golden age of Kronos with Saturn, the birthing of the golden age in September of this year, why they've been talking about with Crowley, the Golden Dawn Society. It is always about gold, and you got to understand that the gold is because that is the mechanism of immortality. This is why people forever have been trying to get their hands on gold, why they value gold. This is why they were transmutating lead into gold, because it was the primary material. It was the source of life. Therefore, the battle over gold throughout society, throughout history. It's important to understand that this is real. This is what is really taking place in the world right now. The influence of the communication with fallen angels, as spoken of, as written and documented of, throughout not only the book of Enoch, but throughout the Bible, is real and tangible evidence of how our world has been changed, how our reality has been revived. Can't even talk. Our reality has been revised. And Kev, we got about 4 minutes. I want you to jump in here. I'm starting to lose my voice.
No probs, man. You go wet your whistle, but I'll be the geek tonight. And just an example, right, that Tony and myself, we're not just making these kind of things up. And we go through all these kind of geeky scientific journals and the kind of stuff that ordinary people just wouldn't look at, okay? You just scroll off it. But back in 2010, I think this here, again, another indication that this is the kind of thing that scientists are looking into, because they have a headline here, and it comes from nature.com. It's a scientific paper about the electrically induced bonding of DNA, wait for this, to gold. That's right, folks. They have been practicing combining DNA and gold as far back as 2010. And it says here they've been measuring the interactions between the DNA and the electrode. They were investigated and found that double-stranded DNA chemisorbs to the gold electrode exclusively. Now, Tony, the reason I bring that up is the fact that you talk about third strands of DNA, gold being used in amongst that, or DNA coated in it. And here we are, scientists actually talking about the fact that, yeah, they're working on that right now.
Yeah, and, just because I'm reading their papers doesn't necessarily mean that I'm buying into everything they say, because they can put out disinformation as much as anybody else. But when you begin to cross-check and cross-correlate research, which you have to do in a basic scientific process, you have to cross-check and confirm. That's why you have peer-reviewed. So if I'm just reading their journals and then saying, hey, this is what they're doing, or I'm believing everything they're saying, no, it's done with discernment and it's done with a critical eye. But after a while, you begin to see enough proof coming from multiple sources and directions to realize that what you're seeing is valid research. And even if they're making up results or they're making up hypotheses and then coming to hypothetical conclusions or falsified conclusions, it still speaks to what their goal is. You can still use bad evidence to project and extrapolate and see what is their endpoint agenda. And perhaps they're using disinformation like they do with movies to pre-program people to get accustomed to accepting their endpoint agenda as a good thing. So it sounds great to achieve immortality. It sounds great to be plugged into the matrix and have all the new latest technology literally plugged into your brain, and to have all the knowledge of the world imparted and downloaded into your brain through a neural net in a sentient world simulation. Oh yeah, they'll sell it to you like it's a good thing. But it all comes down to destruction of your free will and ultimately the destruction of your soul. It's all about control. Always think about control and destruction as being the endpoint that is behind all these things that we're talking about. And I'm not being hysterical here. I'm telling you that I look at their papers, but I discern and I pray about them and I look at it critically and cross-check things. And then it's easy to see, yes, I see their endpoint. So I'm going to give you one last thing to research on your own. This is the Book of Formation, the Book of Creation. This is from Jewish esotericism. And this is the Sefer, and I'm going to spell this for you, S-E-F-E-R. And the second word is Y-E-T-Z-I-R-A-H. You'll find it fascinating. It wraps up everything we've been talking about today. And Kev, thank you so much for getting me through a non-interrupted, beautiful broadcast.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
The wicked ones obviously under heavy Masonic influence.
And we are back, contrary to what it sounded like before the break. I'm Kev Baker, and we are on the Anthony Patch Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio. And you know, as happens sometimes when you're having so much fun giving out all of this heavy, hard information, time just flies. And you know, we work quantumly, myself and Mr. Patch, and where we go, there is no time. So we do have another half an hour left, Tony, but you know, it happens to the best of us, man. And I don't feel so bad now when I forget that my show's running out or I make one of my mistakes. We're all human, right?
I guess so. Sometimes I think I'm a hybrid.
Oh, don't say that. There'll be Photoshops and there'll be rumors on Facebook, the rest of it, man. You know people will think that's true now.
Hey, you should go dig up that picture of Einstein you created of me. I look like a chimera.
That's the best picture I've done yet. I'll get that one. And I'll also post a picture in the chat that's going to be relevant to what we're going to go into now. And this basically contains images of everything we're talking about, Tony, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to wrap it up. And I'm so thankful for you and your artistic talent with Photoshop, because you just, snap these things together in no time today, and it just blows me away. But what we're talking about here is a top to bottom progression. And on the left side, for the audience that's not in chat, we have a tesseract, a cube within a cube. And then just below that, we have what's called the seal of God. And this is a two-dimensional representation of what I show at the bottom below that of the 600-cell tetrahedron. The seal of God is a filter. It was a way in which when Kelly and Dee were communicating with the angels, that the information that came through was deemed to be the truth. And they would actually lay this on a table, and then they would, on the four legs of the table, put identical seals underneath each of the legs so as to isolate the table. And then as they did their rituals, their communication, this seal of God supposedly would filter out any stray signals. Now, this is a process that D-Wave reproduced. D-Wave, their black cube, is a shield. The qubits that are hanging like a spinal column within this black cube, and it's a refrigerated environment that's colder than outer space, let's call it. The shielding blocks all electromagnetic interference from the outside world from getting to these super cold, superconducting qubits. Exactly the same process that the seal of God did for Kelly and Dee with the table, so that, quote, the truth would come through. Now, in the world of computers, that is called coherence and decoherence. Coherence means that you have solutions. You have good, bona fide data coming through. It's not corrupted. Decoherence is when the data is corrupted and there are errors, and you build software that is a self-correcting software that identifies a moment of decoherence and then attacks it and corrects it. This is all a process born out from the seal of God process. Now at the bottom, I have the 600 cell tetrahedron below the seal of God, just the way that Kev put the D-Wave computer at the bottom of the timeline. Working on the right side here, we have the Enochian alphabet. And below that, resulting in the pattern of the qubits of D-Wave, the qubits within a golden armature. That armature is gold for the same reasons that we talked about a few minutes ago. And then resulting in the black cube. Again, the cube is for public consumption. They want everybody to think that the correct model for everything is the cube. Well, we could add a connection between the right-hand corner of this graphic of the cube all the way to the left to the 600 cell tetrahedron and connect that, because that is the actual model, the actual configuration of their quantum computer. This is the 12th model. Okay, I've revealed to you that there are 12 models of computers and the number of qubits. However, there are more than 12, and I'm not going to reveal that on the radio. As I said before, it's for personal security and safety reasons. But it'll come out in the book once the book Coalescence is published. But remember, at the 10th level, we have 65,536 qubits. At the 12th level, we have 262,144. That's a far cry from where they're talking about right now with 2,000 qubits with a black cube. Believe me, it's way beyond that into all these tetrahedrons. Now, on this chart, we showed you the letters that resulted in the numbers. The numbers are the equations, the algorithms, and the programming of the qubits. What we're looking at is the actual arrangement of qubits within the chipset. And if you were to look even closer, you will see that those individual qubits are arranged in each of those dots in an octagonal pattern, a pattern of 8 individual qubits forming one dot that looks exactly the same, that arrangement, as the letters, the 4 fields of letters that are connected by the black cross is exactly the pattern that they use for setting up the qubits. And the reason that the qubits are in a pattern of 8 is because this is the Ogdode. This is the 8 deities that they worship. This is the Ogdode of resurrection, the birthing of the new race, as signified by the coming full solar eclipse August 21st of this year, which the shadow is in the shape of an egg. The egg is the Ogdode. They believe that this eclipse signifies the birthing of the new race, the resurrection of their 8 god deities. Half are female, half are male deities. The merging of the sexes that we see in society today, the elimination of male-female distinction, is pulling together, because this is what the Ogdode represents. The Ogdode is 8, the 8 qubits. You go to CERN and you look at a cross-section of the detectors at CERN, and they are all octagonal in shape. If you go to the Burning Man event and look at the proposed gazebo design, the temple design in a cross-section is an octagonal building or structure. 8 is all significant because it is the result of going back to the letters of the Enochian alphabet. You have the 4 fields connected by the cross. This is 8. The 4 arms of the cross, the 4 fields of the alphabet results in 8. Okay? Finally, we have the Kabbalah tree, which actually has tetrahedrons in it and is composed of the spheres, the sephirods, in which there are 10. This goes and relates to the 10 models, the 10 primary models of D-Wave's computers. They built 10 and achieved this connection of the 10 computers that are networked. They're daisy-chained together. They're all quantum entangled. That's what the Kabbalah tree is representing to you, are the 10 computers that they daisy-chained and linked. Once they achieved that, they could move on to building the spherical model of the 600-cell tetrahedron using the multiples of Kabbalah trees to form the sphere, with one Kabbalah tree running up through the center. The 10th model, the 10 models connected, equals 65,536 qubits, the identical number within the human brain, within the microtubules that make up the neurons of the human brain, the identical number of tubulin dimers. One dimer is a binary pair, a 0 and a 1. None of this is by chance. This is all by design. They're following the patterns that have been set forth by the fallen angels as to how to arrange the elements, the building blocks of the universe, how to transmute elements at the quantum level, utilizing the rituals of the spoken language and the mathematics, all resulting in the geometric arrangement of the elements of their quantum particles. When you go to the quantum scale and begin to move quantum particles around and arrange them in a geometric pattern, they then form a specific element with a specific geometric shape. All of those shapes are comprised of tetrahedrons. All of them, all of the elements on the periodic table. All of the isotopes all have, at the quantum scale, a tetrahedral arrangement. So when they're talking about using a language and a mathematics to describe in writing and to describe in mathematical equations geometric shapes, they're talking about the arrangement of quantum particles. This is why CERN is involved in smashing particles together in order to break down to the basic level of the geometric patterns in which quantum particles are arranged. They are discovering the singularity, the moment of the Big Bang in their parlance, not mine. They are trying to discover the original geometric arrangements of quantum particles. They do that because it is a confirmation of the information that they're getting from the fallen angels. The fallen angels are showing them how to realize the geometry, the geometric arrangement. Once you understand how things are arranged, you can then understand how to rearrange them, how to transmute elements, but more specifically, taking the particles that build DNA, the quantum particles, This goes beyond the sequencing of the human genome. This goes beyond the nucleotides, the building blocks. This goes to the actual quantum particles and rearranging those particles so that you can achieve immortality by building that DNA from scratch. Because if you know the geometry, then you know how to build. This is what the Masonic organization is all about building. This is why they revered the square, because it was all about building the Tesseract to deceive humanity. All the while, the Masonic order knew all about the 600-cell tetrahedron because they knew all about tetrahedrons in 369. So what CERN is doing with particle colliders is to build new DNA. The detectors at CERN, arranged as octagons on a cross-section, what they are doing is they are measuring the trajectory, the spin, and the energies, the frequencies of quantum particles to discover the geometric arrangement of them. The whole purpose at CERN is to resurrect ancient DNA, and they can do that with the geometric arrangements of quantum particles. In a quantum computer, they can design, just like Kevin and I talk about sequencing DNA and building DNA from scratch. If you know the binary sequence, the binary code, the digitized DNA, if you know that, then you can build your own DNA. That's what Dr. Ventnor and all these other guys are all about. All of that is being done with the detectors as MRI machines, and if you want to call them 3D printers, it's more sophisticated than that. We're talking about solid holograms. The holograms are produced from the geometry that they are getting from the fallen angels, that they are discovering and confirming with the collisions of the particles. They are looking at the geometry and utilizing what I euphemistically call as solid holograms. They are building from the quantum level the geometric arrangement of third strand of DNA for the new race of beings. All you have to do is connect the dots from history all the way on up into the modern day application of it. D-Wave, you look at the name D-Wave and you look at John Dee. Okay? There's a physics application to D-Wave. It has to do with an actual waveform, the shape of a waveform of quantum particles. But I think you can also make a case for saying that they're being funny with us by using D-Wave, because they were all about John Dee and Edward Kelly and people before them. And Kelly and Dee were reaching back to the practices from Egypt, because this is what Egypt was all about. This was all about applying methodologies for communicating with fallen angels. Now, it begs the question as a tangent, why are the pyramids of Egypt formed of a square base and not a triangular base, as in the case of a tetrahedron? Because they did not want their constituents, their followers, their lay people, their sheep to know the secrets that the secret practitioners, the leadership, their scientists of the day, their priesthood, and their pharaohs knew all about the tetrahedron. That's why Tesla reached back into Egyptian accounts for his inspiration for modern day application. Same reason D-Wave reaches back into Egypt, and why you see on the theological level the Vatican turning everybody back to the Exodus, back to Egypt. Everything's pointing back to the practices of Egypt. That's what all of this Kabbalistic ritual is about. This is what D is all about. This is what D-Wave is all about. It's about Egypt being applied to today. Kev, I've said enough. We got about 8 minutes. What would you like to jump in there and add to?
I think from now on we should actually call it D-Wave, as in D-E-E wave, because it really is. And I mean, they're playing with multi-dimensions. And of course, they're going to have multi-layered meanings to everything that's going on there. That is how these characters work. And it would not surprise me one little bit, Tony, if there is a dual meaning or a kind of tongue-in-cheek from Gordy Rose and your man Easy Eric when it comes to the name of it. And, when you were talking there about the square-based pyramid, it made me think of when I was in the military. I need to know basis, Tony. And, those people, the normal people, the common people, you just don't need to know. And it's the same throughout history and time. They retain the knowledge, the secrets, while we go naive about our business. It's crazy stuff. It really is. But here we are today, starting to reveal all of this. It's quite unbelievable listening to you, Tony, because just the other day you were dropping into an email that you'd basically had a eureka moment about Tesla and 369. And I'm sitting thinking, there must be surely some bigger way of doing this than emailing Kev Baker that you've worked out Tesla. What strange times we're living in.
We are, but I commend you because you do have the intellect and understanding and insights to understand what I'm talking about. And we have private conversations about things that we never talk about on the radio, that we don't go public with. But the point is, you do get it, and you have the benefit of talking to so many other guests on your weekly shows, on your daily shows, I should say, every week, that you're then able to put into context what it is that I'm talking about. You understand it. You grasp it. You see all of the connections that I do. And it's remarkable because I don't have to say very much to you. And you'll fire back an email and say, oh, yeah, I got it. And so-and-so was talking about it. Or like you did today, you had this book you were referring to. So it's a great relationship that you and I have because we're able to bounce these ideas off each other and have a common understanding, a common basis of research. And it inspires me when I talk to you because it can be kind of, hey, I'm out here in the woods all by myself and who am I going to share this with? So thank you for doing that.
Oh, no, I love all this, and it just brings out my inner geek. It really does. And I mean, you've reignited my fire and my passion for physics and stuff like that, so I can only thank you. And, I've been thinking now as the show was going on, the years that we've kind of done shows together, Tony, think where we started and the kind of information you were into then. And if somebody had told you back then that this is where it would all lead to, I think you probably would have laughed at them. But, I think we've had to go down this path. We've had to go down all these rabbit holes because the 369 Eureka moment, it wouldn't have made any sense to you if you'd had that right at the very start without going through all of this process first. So that begs the question, all the listeners should be thinking about this as well. Just how far are we going to go down this rabbit hole? How much of this information is still to be uncovered? And just what we can do with that ourselves, Tony, as a kind of means of fighting back against this agenda that's unfolding right now.
Yeah, it's always like, okay, big deal. You give me all this information. What do I do with it in my practical everyday life? I got to get up every morning and go to work and, got to do this, got to do that. Well, it all comes down to focusing on where they're taking us. We are because we have very little power or control over the bigger agenda of where, let's just say, evil wants to take mankind. What we can do individually is to learn about these things that I'm bringing to you as sort of bullet points and do your own research, cross-check, corroborate if you can what I'm saying, or disavow, disprove what I'm saying. That's fine. I'm just trying to encourage people to open their eyes and explore on their own these different topics that you and I share between us so they can have their own understanding, come to their own realizations. But the bottom line for me as a Christian, as a witness for Jesus Christ, is that I'm showing people that evil is afoot. Here are the facts and figures. Here's the physical, tangible evidence of evil at work in the world, and take that opportunity to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, Kev. I'm just saying, speaking from myself, that's why I do what I do. So I'll let you jump in there. We got about 3.5 minutes.
Well, Tony, you know personally that recent experiences have brought me a lot closer to Jesus and God. Absolutely. So I'm playing catch up, really, but I do get it because for years I've been covering the fact, and I always tell people, it doesn't matter if you believe in the Bible or not, you have to appreciate that this dark cabal, they're into the dark side. How naive of me then that I wasn't so open to the light side of it all. But I'm here now, and it's up to anyone out there. I don't tell people what to do, but just look at what is going on in the world right now. And we're run by a bunch of dark, psychopathic Satanists, Luciferians, whatever you want to call it. Now, if coming closer to God and accepting Jesus is the way to combat that, well, probably a good idea. But it might not be for you, and that's cool. We all are individual, and I wouldn't tell anybody to do anything they're not happy with. Do what your heart feels right. And Tony, before we go, we have to say, you've got a public appearance tomorrow, right? I'll self-promote you. I know you won't do it. So where can people find you tomorrow, man? You see, you're too modest, brother. I'll be shameless. Where can people see you tomorrow?
Well, I've been invited with our good friend, our mutual friend, Clyde Lewis of Ground Zero Radio. Clyde will be hosting the third Ground Zero University that we've done, and I'll be speaking tomorrow by Skype, live stream Skype, Pacific time from 5 until 6:15. I only have, a little over an hour to talk about what we've talked about today in 2 hours. And so I'll be giving even more bullet points. But yeah, tomorrow through KXL Radio or Ground Zero Radio on the internet, you can see the connection there to buy live stream tickets. I can't appear personally because logistically it just can't happen. It's going to be in Portland, Oregon in the Skype studio with Clyde Lewis.
And you don't want to go there personally anyway, Tony, because we all know what happened last time with the men in black there. So I can only imagine what's going to happen when you're Skype tomorrow. But look at that, a 2-hour show, no interruptions. I hope this is a sign of things to come, Tony.
Yeah, I do too. It's really been a pleasure to keep a train of thought here and to speak with you. And I hope the audience has some information that they can go chase down and some tidbits. I recommend you listen to the show again and take some notes as to the topics we just hit the surface of. I mean, 2 hours, we could do a whole day talking about this stuff.
Absolutely. And don't encourage me. You might give me ideas, but this is fantastic, Tony. Thank you so much. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't end here. I'm going to be on Freaky Friday right after the break. And then 3 hours later, you've got Chris and Cherie Geo taking you beyond the veil. And then Brent Thomas, he's going to pull you through a paranormal portal. All to come right here on Freaky Friday. Tony, always a pleasure, sir.